This training is on using HLS to control one or more video players in producing Christmas or Halloween lighting displays. HLS is capable of directly driving and hopefully getting pretty close at synchronizing a remote video player and synchronizing its audio, which is muted, to the audio that is being used by HLS. If I've got a test sequence up that we're going to use here for talking purposes. I already have created a trigger channel, and that's this blank one right here. If we go to Output and we go to Manage Start Sequence, these are the 10 video players that I let you manage. We're only going to talk to one. The purpose of this matrix is when HLS starts the sequence. Normally, you are going to want to have video start at exactly the same time. If you want video and your audio sequence to start at exactly this time, then this is where you tell me what video files need to be executed so that your players start. If you're going to have your players delay further in the sequence, you'll see how you do that here in a little bit. But what we do is we identify the exact path, file name, and extension for the video file that we want the player to play. Now, if you've watched my other video on my remote HLS video player, you'll remember that each player has a unique ID from 1 to 10. And that's how HLS knows how to talk to it. Now, you're going to have two numbers down here. For the version of software that's out there right now, there's no editing control. You could put these at 0 and I'm not going to complain. But as I've been playing here, creating this video, I've noticed that this number can't get too low or you won't drive the initial video. So I'm probably going to make it a minimum of a ½ second or a 1 second delay. We're going to go with a ½ second. Where these two delay comes from, it's the attempt to synchronize so we get in exactly the same playing position out on the video as we are in the audio sequence. Now, some of you may be saying, hey, the internet's got this remote clock out there. Why doesn't everybody just hook into the remote clock? You're not going to get the type of resolution that I'm hoping for. Now, understand, Windows is not a real-time operating system. We are going to be lucky to get a 10 to 15 millisecond resolution out of Windows. We're going to try, but we're going to be lucky if we get anything. We're definitely not going to get anything less than 10 milliseconds, I'll tell you that. So, there's two parts to this initial synchronization. Again, what we're talking about now is having the video player start at exactly the same time as HLS is starting the audio. So if you were to hear the audio on the player, I mute it, but if you were to hear it, it would be perfectly in sync. Now, testing, I allow you to play the audio out there at the player so your ears can hear how far out of sync they are. But when HLS starts a sequence, it's going to loop through these 10 and it's going to communicate to each player what file that player needs to go ahead and implement. It's then going to give all of those players time to load that file up. We're going to tell it it's going to take at least a ½ second to load up or to wait. Okay? At the very beginning of the file, I'm then going to issue a broadcast play. That's not a peer-to-peer, it's a broadcast. So I'm going to say, any player out there, go ahead and start. Any player that's on this list, I should say, go ahead and start. There's going to be a finite amount of time to transmit that message from HLS out on an Ethernet-based system, to be picked up by the player, to be processed by the player, and then to have the player start playing that. There's going to be a finite amount of time that's going to take place. Your guess, your job is to try to figure out what that finite time is. I've said here we're going to make it 25 milliseconds. So this is the amount of time HLS, after it issues that broadcast play, is going to sleep. So it's 25, it'll be 25 to 35. Like I said, we're going to be lucky to get 10 millisecond resolution out of Windows. So HLS is going to go to sleep for some time between 25 and 35 milliseconds, and then it's going to start playing the sequence. Hopefully, if you've done your timing right, the remote player is starting up within milliseconds of that, and now we're perfectly in sync. So we're going to go ahead and save this. Now, let us say, unrealistically, but we're going to do this for the training purposes, we're playing the video, and let's just say the video that we started with is not going to be a video that's going to last for the complete sequence. It's only going to last for a portion of the sequence. We're going to say it's going to last all of 6 seconds, or excuse me, we're going to want to terminate it at right around the 6-second time frame. So we are going to add a trigger to that trigger control that is going to tell that player, hey, I want you to shut down. So you put the cursor at 6, you right click, and you come down here and modify cursor event. Now there's two types of triggers. One is your normal executable trigger where you can go out and execute a file or a bat file. The other one is player communication, and no is telling us to use player communication. I've already implemented two trigger events. I've got a stop event, which I have as player ID 100. If you remember, player IDs only go from 1 to 10, but if you use 100, it's a broadcast. So any player that's playing, it'll shut down. Let us make it very specifically in this case. We're only going to go to player number 1, since that's the player that's starting. And we have a check mark. That identifies that it's a stop command. We're going to select that command, and we're going to go OK. So now we've placed a trigger event starting right at 6 seconds that will communicate to player number 1, and it's going to stop that video. Now let's come on over here. We'll come over here to 12 seconds. Let's just say right at 12 seconds, we're going to start another audio sequence, and we want to be synchronized with our video player. Well, if you remember the delays I talked about, things don't happen instantaneously. So we've got to back up the issuing of the commands to the player. We got to back it up, and then we got to time it just right so when we say go to the player, it starts running and it's exactly in place with HLS. I'm running 50 millisecond time slots here. I found that 30 milliseconds really isn't enough time to go ahead and start it up. So we're going to come back here. We're going to want to start at 12. There's 500 milliseconds. So we're going to step back 500 milliseconds, and we're going to issue, we're going to go to player. Now we're going to issue our play command here. So that play command is going to start. And it's going to take a finite period of time for, here's a chain of events, right at 11.5 seconds, right down to the millisecond. HLS is going to transmit to player number 1. It's going to say, hey, I want you to load and play, I want you to load this file. So the remote player is going to go through some time, and it's going to sit there and it's going to load and it's going to do everything else. And then it's going to get ready that it's going to want to play. Now it's not going to play just yet. The other thing is, this is something you're going to have to do by trial and error. How long, when HLS, let's back up a little bit. HLS sends one command. It is a load and play. What you're going to have to do for a midstream load and play is how long does your player take once the file is loaded to actually execute and start playing. As an example, let's say it's going to take 25 milliseconds. Or in this case, we've got 20 milliseconds. Excuse me, that's wrong. It's going to take 20 milliseconds. We're going to assume that, remember, we backed up 500. We're going to assume that it's going to take, how many milliseconds do we want to play with before it gets all up and running here? Let's just say it's going to take 100, which means we've got 400 milliseconds we're going to have to go to sleep on here. What you're trying to do is, we backed up 500. The player is going to actually take X number of milliseconds to load and get ready. You're telling it here, sleep this long. After it sleeps this long, then play. You get to manipulate this number such that when the player actually plays, it's within 10 or so milliseconds of HLS actually playing. I'm kind of stumbling here because it's kind of a little technical, but I think you should be able to get the hang of it. So we're going to go with a 400 millisecond delay. We're going to click OK. Now we're going to come over here to 15, and we're just going to reissue our stop again. We're going to issue another stop. So now we have our sequence. We start it at the beginning. We stop it at 6. We start one up at 11:05. Actually, we're looking to have it start playing at exactly 12. We start the process at 11:05, but we want it to play at 12, and then we're going to turn it off at 15. When we see this, the player, that Thriller1.mp4, that's a training video I did earlier on this. So you're just going to pop up, and you're going to see HLS sitting there as all the video is going to do. It's muted, so you're not going to hear any talking. Now, what we need to do is we need to, first of all, let's save it. Then we're going to want to compile it. We've compiled it. Now it's ready for show. Running these videos, these video players, I should say, I elected to only allow you to control the video player in show mode, not in editing sequence mode. There's too much going on. You can start, you can stop, you can loop, you can do all kinds of crazy things. And quite frankly, I'm afraid you can get the player all goofed up and out of sync, and then you got to turn it off, and that's not good. Really, the only time you're going to want to play your player is when you're in show mode. So you may need to do some show mode testing to figure out what all these delays are, but all of the video player controls that actually work in production only work in show mode. The player test, this still works. You can still go out and play with this, so you can make sure you got the file name properly and communication is working and everything like that. But actually, this running off of this control trigger channel only works in show mode. Now, what I've done is I've already created a playlist. I'll show you. I've called it Test Video. And it simply plays one sequence. It's called Test Segment. I've just been reusing one. So we're going to just save this. Now, when I exit, we're going to end up back in my debugger. So I'm not worried about you seeing my debugger here. Oh, we didn't end up in my ended up on the forum. So, oh, I did that wrong. Started the wrong one. I wanted HLS to start up first of all. Okay, HLS is up and running. Now, we're going to assume we're going to go start up a player. Now the player's up and running. We can check to make sure we have communication. We come over here. Yep, we got communication. Let's come back over to HLS. Now, instead of playing a show, I'm going to play a very specific playlist. So I go and I go play a specific playlist. I pick it, which happens to be test video. When I hit play now, the screen's going to go, it's going to immediately flip over to my player. What's going to happen is those timing delays are going to take place. Then you're going to hear Music Box Dancer is playing on the sequence. So it has really nothing to do with the video in the background. But what I'm showing you is that as soon as the sequence starts, the video will start. The video will play a while. It'll shut down. It'll go black. Then we'll start another video up. It'll play for a while. It'll go black. And that'll be concluding our tutorial. So here we go. Boom. Video, music. It's playing. It's in sync, hopefully. We just shut it down. Now we're waiting. We should be starting up a new video here very shortly. There's our new video. We're going to play this video a while. Then we're going to shut it down. I hit the escape. I'm back to my video. And we're going to bail out of that. So, that concludes this training on how to use HLS to control remote video players. There's some timing delays. When you start playing, writing them down on a piece of paper, because you're going to be cutting into 10 or 20 or 50 millisecond resolutions. You're going to want to be able to hone in. The idea is to get these things perfectly in sync, and it's going to take some time, hands-on time playing with it before you can find that out. But enjoy and have a great one.